This seemingly unremarkable family photograph, taken in 1898, holds a secret within its sepia tones. A disembodied hand resting gently on a child's shoulder. In October of 2024, Sarah Mitchell, a genealogy researcher, was meticulously appraising an estate in the historic town of Salem, Massachusetts, when she stumbled upon a discovery that would reshape the understanding of 19th century photography and unveil a poignant tale of loss. Amidst the possessions of the Whitmore family, who had occupied the grand Victorian residence for over a century, Mitchell unearthed a formal family portrait, a relic from 1898. Initially, the photograph appeared to be a typical representation of its time. 5 figures, the Whitmore family, posed stiffly in their parlor. Thomas Whitmore stood proudly behind his seated wife, Mary, while their 3 children were arranged around them in the rigid, formal style characteristic of the era. However, as Mitchell scrutinized the image under a magnifying glass, a jarring anomaly emerged. A 6th hand, undeniably human, rested on the shoulder of the youngest child, 6-year-old Margaret Whitmore. The hand implied the presence of another figure standing behind the family, yet no such figure was visible anywhere in the frame. It was as if a ghost had intruded upon their family moment. "I've been examining historical photographs for over 15 years, Mitchell later recounted, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "I've encountered double exposures, plate damage, and every conceivable photographic error from that period. But this was different. The hand was too distinct, its positioning too deliberate to be attributed to mere accident." This discovery sparked an investigation that would peel back the layers of a tragic narrative, a story of loss, immigration, and the profound psychological impact of trauma on Irish families navigating life in late 19th century America. What Mitchell had uncovered was not a supernatural event, but rather tangible evidence of a deeply human tragedy, one that had been unjustly forgotten by the relentless march of time. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the 89-year-old descendant who was selling the family estate, confirmed that the photograph had always been a source of unspoken unease and hushed speculation within the family. "Grandmother always said there were supposed to be 6 people in that picture," she confided in Mitchell, her voice barely a whisper. "But somehow one of them disappeared." The missing person, as Mitchell soon learned, was Catherine O'Brien, Mary Whitmore's younger sister from Ireland, who had been living with the family as both a governess and a household helper. According to the Brittle family records, Catherine had been present when the photograph was taken, but she vanished from Salem shortly after witnessing the developed image. Mitchell realized she had stumbled upon a case that intricately combined genealogical research, the history of photography, and the largely undocumented experiences of Irish immigrant women in New England. Digging deeper into the Whitmore family archives revealed a household representative of the prosperous families of Salem in the 1890s. Thomas Whitmore, a shipping agent, thrived on Salem's established maritime trade connections. His wife, Mary, had journeyed from County Cork, Ireland, in 1875, marrying Thomas 2 years later. Family correspondence revealed that Mary maintained strong ties to her homeland, regularly sending money to relatives and facilitating the immigration of family members to America. In 1897, she sponsored her younger sister, Catherine's, passage to Salem following a devastating family tragedy in Ireland. Eleanor Whitmore had carefully preserved her great-grandmother's meticulously kept household ledgers, which documented Catherine's arrival and subsequent integration into the family. The records indicated that Catherine was initially employed as a governess for the 3 Whitmore children, earning $8 per month, along with room and board, a generous wage for domestic work during that era. But Catherine was much more than just an employee, Eleanor Whitmore clarified, reading from her great-grandmother's faded diary entries. She was family, the children adored her, and she possessed a remarkable gift for nurturing and caring for them. However, beneath the surface, subtle signs emerged, hinting at a deep-seated struggle rooted in Catherine's past. The household records revealed unusual patterns in her behavior. Mary Whitmore noted that Catherine frequently purchased extra food and supplies, claiming they were essential for the little ones. When questioned, Catherine would become visibly distressed, insisting that Patrick and Molly, names that held no significance to the Whitmore family, required her care. Medical records from the family physician, Dr. Samuel Adams, provided further context to Catherine's unraveling. In August of 1898, Dr. Adams was summoned to examine Catherine after she collapsed during a family dinner. His notes described her condition as severe melancholia and nervous exhaustion, attributing it to unresolved grief and a possible bout of brain fever, a common diagnosis for a range of mental ailments at the time. The fateful photograph session was arranged for October 15, 1898, conceived as a formal family portrait intended for sending to relatives back in Ireland. According to Thomas Whitmore's business correspondence, the commission was expensive, costing $12 paid to Herman Blackwood, Salem's most esteemed photographer. Family letters revealed that Catherine had initially been excited about the photograph, viewing it as a chance to showcase her thriving life in America to her Irish relatives. The tragic irony was that instead of offering solace, the developed photograph would instead trigger the final, devastating crisis in Catherine's already fragile mental state. Herman Blackwood was revered as Salem's premier photographer during the 1890s. Renowned for his technical precision and artistic composition, his business records, carefully preserved at the Salem Historical Society, depicted a methodical professional who took immense pride in his craft and rarely encountered technical difficulties. The Whitmore Commission was documented in exceptional detail, partly because of the bizarre outcome and partly because Blackwood was genuinely bewildered by what had transpired. His correspondence with fellow photographers revealed a man grappling to safeguard his professional reputation while confronting an inexplicable technical failure. In a letter to his colleague William Morse in Boston, dated October 22, 1898, Blackwood lamented, "I am facing the most perplexing situation of my 20-year career. The Whitmore family portrait has resulted in what can only be described as a partial exposure failure, leaving one subject almost entirely absent from the final image." Blackwood's technical notes, unearthed within his studio records, revealed that he had meticulously followed his standard procedures. The camera was a large format plate camera, typical of the period, demanding that subjects remain completely motionless for approximately 30 seconds during the exposure. The lighting had been meticulously arranged, using natural window light augmented by strategically positioned reflectors. Photography experts who have meticulously reviewed Blackwood's notes confirmed that his methods were sound and his equipment was well maintained. There's no indication of technical error in his process, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a historian specializing in 19th century photography at Boston University. The partial disappearance of a subject, while leaving only a hand visible, would be exceptionally difficult to achieve, even intentionally. Blackwood's relentless attempts to explain the unsettling phenomenon exposed his mounting desperation. He contemplated equipment malfunction, improper plate preparation, contaminated chemicals, and incorrect exposure timing. He even returned to the Whitmore residence to meticulously recreate the precise lighting conditions, achieving flawless results with other subjects. The photographer's ultimate conclusion, reached after weeks of relentless investigation, was that Catherine O'Brien must have moved during the exposure in such a manner that her body was not captured, while her hand remained perfectly still. Although this explanation satisfied neither Blackwood nor the Whitmore family, it was the only rational theory that preserved the photographer's professional credibility. Modern photographic analysis suggests that Blackwood's conclusion was likely accurate, although the precise circumstances that would produce such an effect remain highly unusual. Immigration records at the National Archives disclosed the heartbreaking circumstances that had propelled Catherine O'Brien to America. She had arrived at Ellis Island on March 12, 1897, aboard the steamship Celtic from Queenstown, Ireland, but her passage had been funded by the Irish Relief Fund of County Cork, an organization dedicated to assisting families devastated by local tragedies. Irish newspaper archives, now digitized and accessible through international library systems, provided the tragic context for Catherine's immigration. The Cork Examiner from February 28, 1897, reported a catastrophic house fire in the village of Ballycotton that claimed the lives of Patrick O'Brien, his wife, Bridget, and their two youngest children, 8-year-old Patrick Jr. and 6-year-old Molly. Catherine, aged 23, was the sole survivor, having been visiting neighbors when the fire erupted. Parish records from St. Coleman's Church in Ballycotton documented the community's deep concern for Catherine's deteriorating mental state following the unimaginable tragedy. Father Michael Walsh wrote in the church ledger, "Miss Catherine O'Brien continues to struggle greatly with the loss of her family. She frequently speaks of her continued responsibility to care for young Patrick and Molly, and has been found preparing meals and setting places for them at her table." The village's poor relief records, meticulously maintained by the local workhouse, revealed multiple instances where Catherine had been discovered purchasing food and supplies for 4 people despite living alone. Community members reported that she would often engage in conversations with empty spaces, believing her deceased siblings were present. Dr. Patricia Hennessy, a historian specializing in Irish immigration and trauma, explains that Catherine's behavior was consistent with what is now understood as complicated grief disorder. The sudden, violent loss of her entire immediate family, coupled with her survivor's guilt, created a psychological state where she couldn't accept their deaths. Dr. Hennessy noted, the Ballycotton community, while deeply sympathetic to Catherine's plight, eventually concluded that she needed professional care beyond what the small village could provide. The Irish Relief Fund raised money to send her to America, hoping that distance from the scene of the tragedy and the support of her sister, Mary, might help Catherine heal. What they couldn't have anticipated was that Catherine's trauma would follow her across the Atlantic, manifesting in increasingly concerning behaviors that would eventually lead to her disappearance from Salem. Catherine O'Brien's initial year in Salem appeared to be a triumphant narrative of Irish immigrant integration. Letters preserved within the Whitmore family archives indicated that she initially thrived in her role as governess and household helper, forging strong bonds with the 3 Whitmore children and contributing significantly to the household's daily operations. Mary Whitmore's diary entries from 1897 painted a picture of profound relief and joy at having her sister safely in America. "Catherine has brought such life to our home," she wrote in May 1897. "The children adore her Irish songs and stories, and Thomas remarks daily on how much easier our household runs with her capable assistance." However, subtle signs of Catherine's underlying trauma gradually began to surface as she settled into Salem life. Local merchant records, carefully preserved in the Essex Institute's archives, revealed unusual purchasing patterns. Catherine would routinely buy extra food, children's clothing, and household supplies far beyond what the Whitmore family required. Dr. Samuel Adams, the family physician, was first summoned to examine Catherine in November 1897 after Mary Whitmore expressed growing concern about her sister's increasingly erratic behavior. His medical notes described Catherine as physically healthy but exhibiting signs of nervous exhaustion and persistent melancholia. The situation deteriorated throughout 1898. St. Mary's Catholic Church records revealed that Catherine attended daily mass and spent countless hours in prayer, often speaking aloud to what appeared to be empty space beside her in the pews. Father Patrick O'Brien, who was not related to Catherine, noted his concern regarding her mental state in the parish records. Salem police records discovered in the city archives documented several incidents where Catherine was found in the town common late at night, apparently caring for children who weren't actually there. Officer Michael Sullivan reported in September 1898 that he found Miss O'Brien arranging what appeared to be a picnic for multiple children, although she was entirely alone. When questioned, she insisted that Patrick and Molly were hungry and needed to be fed. The Whitmore family's correspondence revealed their escalating concern and confusion surrounding Catherine's behavior. They consulted multiple physicians and clergy members, seeking guidance on how to help her. The prevailing medical understanding of the time attributed her condition to female hysteria and an inherently emotional Irish temperament, offering little in the way of useful or compassionate guidance. By October 1898, the situation had become untenable. Thomas Whitmore's business letters alluded to the immense strain Catherine's condition was placing on the household, while Mary's diary entries expressed profound heartbreak at witnessing her beloved sister grapple with invisible demons. The family portrait session was intended as a positive distraction, a way to create a happy memory and demonstrate to their Irish relatives that Catherine was thriving in America. October 15, 1898 began as a typical autumn morning in Salem. Herman Blackwood arrived at the Whitmore residence at 10 a.m., as documented in his appointment book, carrying his large format camera equipment and fragile glass plates. The session had been meticulously planned, with the family attired in their finest clothing and the parlor meticulously arranged to showcase their prosperity and refined taste. Blackwood's technical notes, carefully preserved in his studio archives, recorded the setup in meticulous detail. Natural light flooding in from the large parlor windows was augmented by carefully positioned mirrors and white fabric reflectors. The camera was mounted on a heavy wooden tripod, precisely positioned to capture the entire family arrangement. According to Blackwood's account, Catherine was initially cooperative and seemed pleased to be included in the family portrait. She was positioned standing just behind young Margaret Whitmore, with her hands resting protectively on the child's shoulders, a common pose for secondary family members in formal portraits of that era. However, witness accounts from the Whitmore family, recorded in later police statements, revealed that Catherine's behavior during the session was decidedly concerning. Mary Whitmore reported that Catherine kept turning to speak to empty spaces on either side of her, apparently addressing children who weren't actually present. Catherine kept saying, "Stand still, Molly and Patrick, mind your posture," Mary Whitmore told police. She was arranging invisible children as if they were part of our family portrait. Mr. Blackwood was patient, but clearly confused by her behavior. Thomas Whitmore's account, given to Dr. Adams several days later, provided further details. Catherine had insisted that the photographer wait while she helped Patrick straighten his collar and smooth Molly's dress. The session, which should have taken approximately 30 minutes, stretched to nearly 2 hours as Catherine repeatedly adjusted the positions of children only she could see. Blackwood's professional training required him to work with difficult clients, so he patiently waited while Catherine completed her mysterious arrangements. His notes indicated that he initiated the exposure process once Catherine appeared settled and the visible family members were properly positioned. The 30-second exposure proceeded normally, with all subjects remaining appropriately still. Blackwood recorded no technical issues during the session itself, and the family promptly paid his fee upon completion. It wasn't until the glass plates were developed 3 days later that the impossible became starkly apparent. Catherine O'Brien had somehow vanished from the photograph, leaving only her hand visible on Margaret's shoulder. When Herman Blackwood delivered the developed photographs to the Whitmore family on October 18, 1898, he was prepared to offer an explanation for what he assumed was a technical mishap. However, the family's reaction was far more intense than he had anticipated, particularly Catherine's reaction to witnessing her near-complete absence from the image. Mary Whitmore's diary entry from that day, penned in shaky handwriting, captured the harrowing moment. Catherine became hysterical upon seeing the photograph. She insisted that Patrick and Molly were visible in the image, pointing to empty spaces and demanding to know why we couldn't see them. When we explained that she herself was barely visible, she collapsed entirely. Dr. Samuel Adams was summoned immediately. His medical report, filed with the Essex County Medical Society, described Catherine as suffering from acute nervous shock and complete disconnection from present reality. She had become catatonic, seemingly unable or unwilling to respond to her family's attempts to offer comfort. The photograph itself became the focal point of Catherine's rapidly deteriorating mental state. According to witness accounts, she spent hours staring at the image, tracing the empty spaces with her finger, and speaking to the people she believed were present, but invisible to everyone else. Father Patrick O'Brien from St. Mary's Church was called upon to provide spiritual comfort. His report to the bishop, carefully preserved in the diocesan archives, revealed the profound depth of Catherine's psychological crisis. Miss O'Brien appears to exist in two realities simultaneously: the present world, where her siblings are deceased, and an alternate reality where they remain alive and dependent upon her care. Thomas Whitmore's business correspondence from this period revealed his growing desperation to help his sister-in-law, while simultaneously protecting his own family from the psychological trauma of witnessing her breakdown. He consulted with physicians in Boston and even considered having Catherine committed to Danvers State Hospital, an asylum known for its grim reputation. However, Catherine made the decision for them. On the night of October 18th, she packed her few belongings and left a brief, heart-wrenching note for the family. "I must take Patrick and Molly somewhere safe, where people can see them as clearly as I do. Thank you for your kindness, but we cannot stay where we are not welcome." By morning, Catherine O'Brien had vanished from Salem entirely, leaving behind only the mysterious photograph and a family forever changed by their encounter with the devastating effects of unresolved trauma. The Whitmore family never heard from Catherine again. Despite extensive efforts to locate her through Irish community networks and church organizations throughout New England following Catherine's disappearance, the Whitmore family launched an immediate search effort that would continue for months. Thomas Whitmore contacted police departments throughout New England, while Mary reached out to Irish community organizations and Catholic churches in major cities where Catherine might have sought refuge. Salem Police Department records, carefully preserved in the city archives, documented the official investigation. Detective Patrick Murphy, who was not related to Father O'Brien, interviewed family members, neighbors, and local merchants who had known Catherine. His reports painted a poignant picture of a deeply troubled woman whose behavior had become increasingly erratic in the weeks preceding her disappearance. The investigation revealed that Catherine had withdrawn her modest savings, totaling $47, from the First National Bank of Salem on October 17th, the day before she vanished. Bank records indicated she had requested the money in small bills, suggesting she was planning a journey but wanted to avoid drawing attention to herself. Railroad ticket agent Michael O'Sullivan at Salem Station reported selling a ticket to Boston to a young woman matching Catherine's description on the morning of October 19th. However, his account was undeniably puzzling. He claimed to have sold 3 tickets, 1 adult fare and 2 children's fares, to the same woman, despite not seeing any children accompanying her. She insisted she needed passage for herself and 2 little ones, O'Sullivan told police. When I asked where the children were, she pointed to empty spaces beside her and said they were shy around strangers. I thought perhaps she was purchasing tickets for children who would join her later, so I completed the sale. Boston police were notified, and Detective James Flanagan of the South Boston Precinct took up the search. His investigation, meticulously documented in Boston Police Department files, traced Catherine to the Irish immigrant neighborhoods around South Boston, where she had sought shelter at St. Augustine's Catholic Church. Father Thomas Murphy's parish records confirmed that Catherine had indeed arrived in Boston on October 19th, requesting assistance and temporary housing. She was provided with a small room in the church's charitable lodging facility, where she remained for several months. However, even in Boston, Catherine's behavior continued to deteriorate. Parish records documented numerous incidents where she was found preparing meals for multiple people despite living alone, purchasing children's clothing with her limited funds, and engaging in conversations with invisible companions. The final documented sighting of Catherine O'Brien came from Dr. James Whitman, a Boston physician who specialized in mental disorders. He examined Catherine in March 1899 at the request of Father Murphy, who was increasingly concerned about her deteriorating condition. Dr. James Whitman's medical assessment of Catherine O'Brien, dated March 15, 1899, provided the clearest clinical picture of her condition that exists in the historical record. His report, filed with the Massachusetts Medical Society, described Catherine as suffering from what he termed chronic melancholia with hallucinatory manifestations. Miss O'Brien presents with a complete inability to accept the reality of her siblings' deaths. Dr. Whitman wrote, "She has constructed an elaborate alternate reality in which Patrick and Molly remain alive and dependent upon her care. This delusion has become so complete that she perceives their presence as physical reality." Dr. Whitman recommended immediate institutionalization at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts, which was then considered the most progressive facility for treating mental disorders. However, Catherine disappeared from her Boston lodgings on March 18, 1899, before the arrangements could be finalized. Boston police records indicated that Catherine was last seen walking toward Boston Harbor in the early morning hours of March 19, 1899. Dock worker Timothy Sullivan reported seeing a young woman who matched her description standing at the end of Long Wharf, apparently speaking to companions he couldn't see. She was gesturing as if helping children, telling them not to be afraid, Sullivan told police. But she was completely alone out there. When I called out to ask if she needed assistance, she turned and smiled, then walked into the fog. By the time I reached the spot, she was gone. Despite extensive searches of the harbor and surrounding areas, Catherine O'Brien was never found. She was officially declared missing by Boston authorities on April 1, 1899, becoming one of thousands of Irish immigrants whose fates were tragically lost to the hardships and challenges of 19th-century urban life. Father Murphy preserved Catherine's few remaining belongings, including a letter she had written but never sent to her sister Mary. In it, she wrote, "Please understand that I must take Patrick and Molly somewhere we can be together properly. They have been so patient, waiting for me to find the right place for our family." The letter concluded, "Tell the photographer that his camera captured the truth. I am disappearing from this world because I belong in another one where the children I love are still alive and still need me." Catherine's ultimate fate remains unknown, but her story provides a poignant window into the profound psychological trauma endured by countless Irish immigrants who fled not only poverty but also deeply personal tragedies that followed them relentlessly across the Atlantic. More than 125 years after the mysterious photograph was taken, modern experts have developed a clearer understanding of both the technical and psychological factors that contributed to the creation of this remarkable historical artifact. The case of Catherine O'Brien and the Whitmore family portrait has become a subject of intense study for historians, psychologists, and photography experts who are interested in exploring the complex intersection of trauma and visual documentation. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a photography historian at Boston University, has meticulously analyzed Herman Blackwood's techniques and concluded that the partial disappearance of Catherine from the image was likely the result of her movement during the extended exposure time. Victorian photography required subjects to remain perfectly still for 30 seconds or more. If Catherine moved her body while keeping one hand stationary, it could create exactly the effect captured in the photograph. Dr. Walsh explains. This technical explanation gains even greater credibility when considered alongside witness accounts of Catherine's unsettling behavior during the portrait session. Her apparent interactions with invisible children would have undoubtedly caused significant movement, while her protective hand on Margaret Whitmore's shoulder may have remained remarkably steady throughout the exposure. Dr. Patricia Hennessy, who has dedicated her career to studying Irish immigrant trauma, places Catherine's story within the broader context of 19th century mental health understanding. Catherine was suffering from what we now recognize as complicated grief disorder, possibly compounded by post-traumatic stress disorder. The sudden, violent loss of her entire family created psychological symptoms that 1890s medicine simply couldn't properly diagnose or effectively treat. The photograph itself has become an integral part of the Whitmore family legacy, eventually being donated to the Salem Historical Society, where it serves as a powerful and enduring reminder of the human cost of immigration and the long-lasting effects of trauma. Eleanor Whitmore, now 90 years old, reflects on her family's profound connection to Catherine with a mixture of both sadness and newfound understanding. "For over a century, we thought of that photograph as just a strange family curiosity," she says, her voice tinged with melancholy. "Now we understand it as tangible evidence of a tragedy. A young woman so utterly devastated by loss that she couldn't exist fully in our world anymore." The case has also contributed to historical research on photography's role in documenting psychological trauma. The image captures not only a technical anomaly but also a poignant moment when grief manifested visually, creating a permanent record of Catherine's desperate struggle to exist between the world of the living and her fading memories of the dead. Catherine O'Brien's fate remains a mystery, but her story has found its place in history as a testament to the power of loss. A century's worth of evolving understanding regarding mental health, delving into the profound impact of trauma, which possesses the eerie capability to seemingly erase individuals from the fabric of their existence, relegating them to mere phantoms leaving behind fragmented echoes and whispers of their prior selves. This erasure isn't merely metaphorical. It's a tangible severance, a severing of connections to reality, leaving those affected adrift in a sea of fractured memories and distorted perceptions, struggling to navigate a world that no longer feels familiar or welcoming. The trauma acts as a corrosive agent, gnawing away at their identity, their sense of self, and their ability to engage with the world in a meaningful way, leaving only faint outlines and shadows where vibrant personalities once thrived.